Global electricity demand is expected to grow by 4% per year through to 2027. That's the equivalent of one Japan per year. This is a huge challenge for our energy system and to meet our global climate goals, including the COP28 pledge to double energy efficiency by 2030. And the world is off track to meet that target, according to the IEA. Energy efficiency brings enormous climate, energy security and economic competitiveness benefits. So with COP30 approaching, how can policymakers and corporate decision makers double down on energy efficiency in order to realise its full potential? Today I'm in Amsterdam and I'm delighted to be speaking with Alice Steenland, Chief Strategy, Sustainability and Marketing Officer at Signify, the world leader in lighting and a recognised leader in sustainability. Alice, I've just set out some of the huge challenges ahead of us. Let's start with what Signify is doing and tell us about Signify and its sustainability journey to date.
Okay, thank you so much, Helen, and thanks for being here today with us. So Signify is the world leader in lighting. We are a $6 billion global company present in more than 70 countries. We employ about 30,000 people. And we are, as you said, also a leader in sustainability. And when it comes to climate in particular within sustainability, we kind of see this in two ways. So one is our commitment across the full value chain, so scopes 1, 2, and 3, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, reducing those by 90% against a 2019 baseline by 2040. And that's encapsulated in our climate transition plan, which we issued last year. We were very proud of that. And then there's another element, which is more, how do we get the industry, as the leader in the industry, how do we get the industry to move? And I like to cite a data point which a lot of folks don't know about, and I didn't know about before I worked in lighting, which is that lighting represents 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's the exact amount of the aviation industry. And we hear a lot about aviation having to reduce. Lighting is an area where all of the solutions are available. We could do it overnight. We could cut that by half if we just switched to LED technology, which has been around for decades now already. We just need to do it. It's more a political decision than a technology challenge.
Yes, there's a huge role for companies. You know, Climate Group, we work with the EP100 campaign. That's a global commitment to energy productivity, and combined our members have reduced emissions which are more than the annual emissions of Brazil in 2023. And then companies like Signify obviously have innovative solutions, expertise, green skills, and we ask companies to work with us, kind of continue to push that policy needle. You've talked about corporates a lot in your new white paper. Can you tell us a bit about that and how companies can help meet that COP28 energy efficiency pledge? Yeah,
well, thinking about what companies can do, I do like to think about the framework we used, which I think was inspired by the We Mean Business Coalition, which was around sort of the 4 A's in climate. And that's what we use for the basis of our climate transition plan. So first, set an ambition. So in our case, we have science-based targets that have been validated by a third party. We know we can do it. We know we can get there, and we know it's in line with science. We've set that ambition. And I think other companies need to do that. So I know with the current regulation discussions, the question of climate transition plans, are they mandatory? Are they not mandatory? They might not be mandatory, but they are a very good idea, because then you have an idea of how you can stay within planetary boundaries, but also how your business can be viable over time. So there's the ambition piece, there's the action piece to back that up. So do you understand what actions it would take to get there? We are a big fan of lighting. It's very easy for companies to change their lighting. It's one of the easiest, lowest hanging fruits in climate action. But that's the action piece to support whatever ambitions companies are leading. And then advocacy, and we see how important advocacy is right now at this particular point in time. There's a lot of policy shifts going on. There is a huge opportunity for companies to speak up and say what they believe is the right thing for the economy in the future, and that transition needs to happen, and I think a lot of us believe that. And then the A on accountability, so reporting, being accountable to stakeholders, involving them in decision making, connecting with them. So those are things companies can do. I think it's a nice framework to think about these 4 A's. And on advocacy, this is one of the reasons we wrote the white paper. It's one of the reasons we're here today talking about it. At this particular point in time, I think companies really need to speak up about how important it is to maintain the commitment that we've all made collectively, globally, towards this energy transition, and in our case, really pushing the role of energy efficiency within that.
Yeah, and that's how Climate Group works as well on that sort of framework. So for our companies, they commit to ambitious pledges, through EP100 campaign I've mentioned and our other campaigns. And then we can see that, we do that annual accountability cycle. Like, how are you doing to achieve your goals? And through that, we can see members meeting their goals early. About 80% of our EP100 members are going to meet their goal before their target date, which is great. But we also use that process to ask, where are you prevented from hitting those goals, and how do we then translate that into policy action? So the ambition and the accountability lead into that advocacy. They're all very, very connected. And we're seeing some ambition, from policymakers as well. That's good. I think the energy crisis has been key there. People can see, look, actually energy efficiency, when energy is under pressure, you need to sort of find those efficiencies. But we also sort of see that it's one of those really hard areas, I think, for policymakers. What do you see as the specific role that lighting can play here, Alice?
Yeah. So last year, I think you cited the International Energy Agency. So I think in their data, we're looking at a 1% improvement in energy efficiency last year. So within that, buildings play a very big role. And if you look at building renovation rates, they have also been at 1% last year, and we're stagnating at that level. Whereas if we want to hit any of our climate goals, we need to be more at 2.5% of renovation. Every time you renovate, you change the lighting. And lighting in particular, in some cases, can represent up to 30% of the electricity consumption of whatever the structure is, if it's a large warehouse or even a city street lighting. And like I was saying, like we often say, with LED technology, it's been around for decades, you can reduce already by half versus traditional lighting. You can reduce the electricity consumption by half. If you add to that any kind of connected smart lighting system, you can reduce it all the way down to 80%, which means you have 30% of your electricity consumption coming from lighting. You can almost eliminate 80% of that just by technologies that are available today. So I think in terms of overall energy efficiency and driving this shift, we are very much hoping that there's going to be much more of a focus on energy efficiency, specifically the role that buildings play in that. And within that, lighting has a huge contribution to make.
Great. Can we talk a bit about public-private collaboration? Climate Group's obviously championed that a lot. We've worked together in the last year on the Renovation Revolution project, where we brought together companies with some of the government partners that we had, and we came up with recommendations as well there about sort of scale and how you might take those to scale. Can you say a bit about how Signify looks at that sort of partnership?
Yeah. So we absolutely believe that we can't do this alone, and especially on the policy front and the advocacy front. We need to have partners. We need to have the same message. There's so many voices out there now, and I think we need clarity around. We are sticking to this objective of the energy transition. This is what it means. This is the benefit. So we need partnerships like this, and we need to work in coalition. And I'd say Signify's relationship to advocacy is very long-standing. We have a nice story I like to tell. Back in 2006, before we were even Signify, it was still Philips Lighting at the time. We came out with a global call in conjunction with several climate advocacy partners, a global call for a ban on incandescent lighting. And this was at a time when it was 2/3 of our sales volume. So it's essentially a little bit like, I don't know if you remember the Patagonia campaign, which don't buy this shirt or something like that. So we were essentially coming out against something that was pretty core to our business at the time. But because we knew it was not right for our customers, it was not right for the planet, it was not right for the climate, transition, and we needed to accelerate that. And so it's very unusual for corporates, I think, to go that far in terms of advocacy, but it's something we're quite proud of because it was the right direction. Now LED is 80% of, more than 80% of what we sell, and more than 80% of what the industry sells, more or less. So we are getting there collectively, but it's too slow. And now we have put advocacy again sort of front and center in our climate strategy.
That's great. And I think it's a really good example because, we've often said that companies that are leading on this are often, in favour of policy that essentially levels the playing field. And, once you sort of levelled that playing field with policy, then businesses can get back to what they're good at, which is innovating and coming up with, what's the thing that you compete on. And so that's why we bring together groups of companies that often might look like competitors in some cases, or sort of in different systems, because actually if you can get the right policy levers, you can unlock the power of corporates against that.
Absolutely.
We've Signify putting out this white paper. Can you tell us a bit about the term negawatts? Because that's maybe one of the terms in there that people aren't going to have heard of.
Yeah, and thank you for your help in supporting us in the release of our white paper, Unlocking Negawatts, the Role of Lighting in Energy Security and Decarbonization. We think it's such an important message to get out, and we're really happy to be talking about it today. So Negawatts is not a Signify invention. So it was the former chief scientist at RMI who came up with this idea that you can unlock energy. So basically it's a source of energy. Energy efficiency is a source of energy. And I think energy efficiency is a very diffuse concept for a lot of people, and Negawatts is a way to make it show, sort of convey the fact that this is real energy. So you can put energy onto the grid the same way as if you set up new wind turbines. You can put energy onto the grid through energy efficiency. So Negawatts is a nice way, I think, to capture that. And what we like to talk about when specifically talking about lighting is, if you did this conversion and all of the conventional lighting today was converted to LED, you would free up enough electricity to power every single electric vehicle on the market today. You would free up enough electricity to power 100 million heat pumps. And this is essentially the equivalent of today, 52% of all of the electricity generated by nuclear power plants. So we're talking a lot about reinvesting in nuclear, starting up nuclear. 52% of that energy today you could get just by changing your light bulb. So I want to communicate how easy this would be if we just decided to do it. In terms of electricity costs, and that's also on top of mind because the resources right now and the availability of funding for lots of other projects that are on the horizon is top of mind. This would free up 600 billion euros in savings from energy consumption savings. So I think the Negawatts is a nice way to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people get a bit sort of like, well, hang on, if we're going to have renewable energy and that's all like essentially free, or kind of, there's not an environmental cost when you got it. Why do I need to reduce energy use? And it's missing that the mathematics of demand, and that each of those installations you still need resources. So we've got to have this kind of renewable energy efficiency story working really together and moving towards that future, which really is renewable energy, flexible, smart grids, smart buildings, using AI, things like that, in order to reduce right down as far as possible the energy that we need, and then supply that with renewable sources.
Absolutely. Yeah, we really see it as a duo. So the energy transition, so changing the energy supply towards renewables and changing the energy demand to allow us even to do that. Like if you look at the grid today, to be able to free up the pressure on the grid, you need to pull some demand out of that to make the whole system work. And when you look at global energy consumption, which is expected to rise by 34% by 2050, then you also have the influence of new demand around AI, around data centers, so driving really excess demand. You've got to free up some of that energy. So you need both megawatts and you need negawatts. It's a pair. It's a partnership. And then I like to often cite a commentary from Ursula von der Leyen, who said the cheapest energy is the energy that we don't use. Yeah. And that's what we use very often. So when you think about megawatts and negawatts, maybe think about negawatts as a first easy, cheap solution. It's fast, it's easy, and it frees up the ability to invest in the megawatts you need.
One thing that I always say about energy efficiency is, compared to renewable energy is, companies are opening things. So they're like cutting ribbons. Yeah. Energy efficiency can be actually kind of invisible, and it's what you don't see. That said, let's just talk a bit about AI in buildings and some of the work Signify is doing on that, because that is super cool and visible, I would say.
Yeah.
And in my own house, I have LED.
Smart connected.
And I'd just like to say, go blue lights in the evening, or purple is quite cheering.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, talk a bit about AI and smart energy use, and because I think as well the AI story is very much around, you know, huge data centers, huge demand, but it can also help us save energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually connecting it to the policy environment, but the push towards building management systems, which is part of the upcoming regulation on the energy performance of buildings. That type of technology allows us to use connected systems, sensors, AI processing of the information to basically optimize the consumption. And like in terms of lighting, when we talk about, you know, reducing consumption by 50% just by switching the light bulb from a conventional to an LED, and then an additional down to 80% reduction if you just add a connected system, and AI has a lot to do with those connected systems moving forward.
Great. I think it's so interesting how it's all coming together. On our energy efficiency work, you know, we're now pulling together a policy working group as well to look at what are the policies that we need, what regulatory progress do we need, and also to get the global progress that we need on this topic, because it is neglected. So any final recommendations for businesses and policymakers coming out of the white paper that's being published?
Yeah, no, we definitely want to communicate the key messages. So we have 5 main recommendations. For businesses, first, this eternal idea of what gets measured gets managed. So we really encourage folks to take seriously, you know, trying to understand what is the energy you're consuming, where is it coming from, and where can you eliminate it, which leads us to the second recommendation, which is of course in the LED space and the lighting space. It's often the lowest hanging fruit. It's the cheapest and fastest way to cut out some of the carbon emissions, but also to save money for companies. So we do see companies who, if they spend time studying their footprint, they very often focus on lighting early on in terms of ROI. Then number 3 is the renovation story, and that's also for policymakers, and not only for businesses in their own space, but policymakers, because we are now at a 1% annual renovation rate globally. We need to get to 2.5% if we're going to stay within a livable planet, because buildings contribute so much to climate and carbon emissions. And there, for a message for policymakers, is also the incredible jobs engine that is represented by energy efficiency. So it seems like a diffuse sector. If you put together all of the players in energy efficiency in Europe, for example, it is one of the leading industries in the entire region. This creates a huge number of jobs. These are local jobs. You're fixing buildings, you're doing it, you know, it's a lot of labor, and it's a lot of jobs creation. So that's a message we try to push for policymakers. Then also for the policymakers, and I think it's particularly relevant now, is we need a stable operating environment. So please do not change radically the course of travel, not only for planetary reasons, but for economic reasons. We cannot have a policy environment that is fluctuating all of the time so that we don't know where to put our investments. So now we have had many global agreements, including at the COPs, around where we need to go and how we need to get there. We need to maintain that direction. And then the 5th has to do with COP30 and the nationally determined contributions and all of the work that countries are doing over the next few months. And we're really very strongly sending the message, you need to think about megawatts and negawatts together. It's 2 sides of the same coin. When you're talking about climate action, when you're talking about energy transition, you need to be thinking about both of those, and they should both be present in those commitments.
Yeah, great. I think those are really important recommendations, and a lot of what we've said over the years, particularly some of those points about consistency. And like I said earlier, businesses are open for there being regulation, but create level playing fields, but it not changing all the time, and we get that message all the time from businesses. You know, we've been working together on this Renovation Revolution project, again bringing policymakers and businesses together and showing the benefits, things like job creation and so on. So great to hear all of that, and I agree with you, we need to push all of this through into this NDC process this year. So Alice, thank you very much for your time, and really look forward to seeing this white paper get out into the world.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for the partnership.
Thank you.